Snowflame, a small northern continent to a world long ended. A deathly smog rolls across the sea and sky, harvesting the colors of life as it slinks on. The sky, no less a victim to the sights below, is smothered by tar-black clouds. Where once regular snow flurries buffed against ancient towering pines, there was only windless, iced, chilled air and naked wooden pillars. Snowmelt has given way to the dead earth and broken gravel, complementary to the dead that walk these lands. Cinder Peaks, the prized vacation town of Snowflame that managed to thrive on the gold of the wealthy, filling their empty purses with half-kept promises to reveal the town's past warrior culture, has either now been boarded up in haste or torn down by the undead that roam aimlessly in these dying woods. Aimless until the guttural shriek echoes from the distance, rousing the former denizens of this nameless planet along with the deathless ogres and beholders. There is no saving this land, only the people and their history, what's left of it. Virus had sent one of their own to scout and gauge the levels of danger, only to have the familiar magics of portal crafting be denied in a half-breath. The priest immediately took this as a sign of Viren to steer clear of this realm, but the council wouldn't let there be an end of things, given they had just left one of their own stranded. Days after, and a small team of newcomers to Virus would be assigned to the task of rescue, or in worst case, retrieval. Dr. Ven, the undead-cursed blood cleric, Noxium, the tiefling-touched half-elf bard, and Noble, the human fighter warlock of the sea, enter a reopened portal to the other planar continent and are met with all the oddities as described, paying particular interest to the docile nature of the undead, even when provoked. All seemed still as the party marched on, eventually meeting with the mayor of Cinder Peaks, trapped in his home with his children and an elderly woman whose mind wavers for presumed dementia. They had been guarding the body of the missing scout Marshal Rikus, who revealed his talent to the party when the undead were spurred to life again by the echoing cry, and he himself leapt to action. During the struggle, the team managed to return to the portal home only to see two rotting beholders devour the magic of a god. No options left. Noble, Ven, Noxium, Marshall, and the mayor's family made their way to the peak of the town. Upon arrival, the trio saw what shape this town truly was in. 5 active warriors who practiced the old ways of combat and at least 50 plus civilians broken by loss and fear. This rescue mission went from dour to dire. The undead could be seen gathering at the edge of the sickly fog, a reminder or a flex of power to the surviving people by whatever necromancer was clearly responsible for this horror. The Snowflame mercenaries helped prepare some semblance of defenses out of the ruined buildings. Warlike pikes stuck up from the ground darted along the hill toward the mountain resort. Head counts were made as the creeping sense of the attack gripped the hearts of the people. The old woman from before, escorted by the mayor, was now missing. Presumed return to her home, while everyone else was preparing for the onslaught. This is where we see sellswords become heroes. Each of these men were brought to Virus as expendable mercenaries with the promise of starting a new life in Fernvi, the continent to the town of Virus. All that was asked of them was to perform work on behalf of the city, and life would be as easy as adventure allows. And in this time, their mission was to retrieve Marshall, not the remaining souls of a Lich's hit list. They owed these people nothing. And yet, Noble volunteered himself with little chance for rebuttal to run and search for the woman, boosted with speed by the magics of Dr. Ven. Whilst the final preparations were made for defenses, the good doctor took a gamble and prayed to a goddess of death and blood who had been knocking on the door of his mind, seeking guidance, if not full assistance. A god Ven only had a minor understanding of, and from a world not his own. Noxium, meanwhile, is and never was much of a fighter. Growing up, the dancer took advantage of openings his enemies and clients left for him. In this moment, he had neither the ton nor the blade to add much of anything to the fight coming, or the trauma brewing. Instead, he simply took the time to entertain and calm the children, and in turn their families, helping put smiles on with his dances and wild but oddly appropriate jokes. Noble finally found the old woman, seeing her in a trance-like state, digging for something, panicking, muttering about the necklace. Either moved by this woman's strange desperation or figuring she'd just wander off again otherwise, he searched the muck and mud of the dying land for the necklace, and upon finding it, was pulled into a nightmare. The amulet was of a gold chain, an ornamental shell decorated with skeletal hands all linking together around the gem in the center of the piece. and that center held a sharp, bestial eye. An eye that now covered the skies above the sellsword. Hell, it was the skies. The gazing eye moved gently from side to side, as if looking for something, only to fixate its narrow pupil on Noble, freezing him in place. The only things to set Noble free were the echoes of the undead beginning their march, and mud slapping his face from the now possessed-free woman. He picked her up and burst into as hard of a sprint as he could, still holding on to the cursed jewelry. He delivered the last of the people of Snowflame to the soon-to-be-fallen half-assed keep. Noxium's dances and songs fell on deaf ears as the howls of the hunger grew closer, and while exhausted, Noble took his sword and shield and readied with the front of the remaining Snowflame warriors. There would be no surviving this, and only an escape with cost. Then had reached her, Natalia, goddess of death and undeath of Fernvi, the world that held the city of Virus. A vampire-turned goddess, the source of Ven's crimson clerical control. She wanted two things for her efforts in assisting the mortals in need: a sacrifice of what little blood Van had left in his cursed body, and a choice. Deep down, in truth to her and themselves, the people within scope had to choose who or what they wanted to save. Many of the citizens and the native swords simply wished for themselves and their families, but what Natalia wanted most was the three men sent to save one other's life make their choice. In the end, while a brief flirting of selfish needs crossed their minds, the desire to save others who were scared, helpless, and simply wanting to survive was what the goddess heard the most in their hearts. From that blood sprayed on the ground, a red pool opened and swallowed the inhabitants of the former Hot Springs Resort, taking them, briefly more terrified civilians, away to safety in the outer planal city, but leaving behind the sellswords, the mercenaries. While terrified, they each felt content with their choice to stay behind, a choice to fight to the last man, to do something good, finally escaping their pasts. Whether they realized it or not, they made their choice, and it was a favorable one. As the portal began to close, a green muscular fist burst through the blood-borne gateway, pulling at the edges of the doorway open, with murmurs and chanting of magics backing the arms up. The voice of an orc, a captain, Baska Lockjaw, supported with 5+ men and women of the Varisian Guard, forced their way through, with the mission to assist these heroes in defending what was left of a dying culture. You ain't doing this alone.